You're tuning in to the Raised by Rentals program. This podcast will contain strong language and spoilers for decades-old media properties.
Join us.
Welcome, everybody. This is the podcast where we examine pop culture franchises of the VHS era and improv new story concepts playing in those sandboxes. But since we're a couple of middle-aged, straight, cis male, native-born American white guys, our opinions are obviously really important. So sometimes we bless our captivated audience to whole episodes where we rant on and on and on about our favorite movies, TV, and games. I'm Josh.
I'm Mike.
And we were Raised by Rentals. Mike! I'm sick and my back hurts, so I'm in the mood to hate on some shiz today.
Sounds good to me. I was not expecting that intro, and it really caught me off guard.
No, I was surprised by how many adjectives I was able to come up with pretty easily.
Well, and it's funny because for the audience, just to understand a little bit, we've been talking for about a half hour prior to hitting record, so we've already just been bitching about life in general, our jobs, etc., etc. So when you got to that intro, man, it just totally knocked me out of the I'm pissed off and ready to bitch. Now I'm just that's funny.
Well, we got to get back in the mood to be pissed off and ready to bitch. Guess what we're going to do today? We're going to do our 16th Rental Rant episode. Mike, this is our 90th episode. We've hit 90. The 90s. We're in the 90s.
Yay,
it was
the
the
best
90s. Yeah.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Oh,
Or
God,
maybe it was just the best of times.
It was the best of times. We were also young and dumb and very opinionated. I mean, we're still pretty opinionated, and I don't know about you. I'm still kind of dumb, but I'm no longer young, so I got that going for me.
There you go. Right. Oh, I know. I wish. But yeah, you're right. In terms of just being opinionated, and as the father of a teenager and almost teenager, I hear a lot of opinions.
Yes.
A lot of very strong opinions about goddamn near everything.
Oh yeah, mine's just on the upswing of that, and it's I know I'm in for a fucking treat over the next couple of years.
Oh yeah. It's like, and it always makes me remember how I was at that time. As a father, I want to be like, hey, let's don't get all twisted about it. Like, calm down. Like, think about the other side, and maybe there's a reason for it, and whatever. There's exceptions to every rule, or whatever it is that they're bitching about. Sometimes it's they come home from school and it's like, oh my god, the rules are so freaking stupid, they don't make any sense, and all the teachers are so dumb, and all they care about is grades and getting paid, and they don't care about the kids, and they're all like racist and misogynist, and it's like, whoa, it's like, slow down there.
Everything sucks. I hate it all.
It's like the whole world is out to get me personally. Yeah.
Oh God, I remember feeling like that when I was young, though.
Right? Yeah. Well, and that's what I was getting at. Like, as a parent, I'm like, okay, let's relax. Let's think about both sides or whatever. But then I think back to being that age, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? Like, there was a lot of things where I used to just be like, yeah, fucking Led Zeppelin sucks. The fucking Rolling Stones suck. Fucking country music sucks. Fucking, I don't know, like romantic comedies suck or whatever.
Yep.
And it's like you're at a certain age of your life where everything just becomes black and white, and again, I'm sure that there's an explanation for it. It's like you're growing into who you're going to be and developing your own mind and your own personality, and a lot of that comes with falling on one side of an argument or not. But it ends up where you end up with just a lot of really, really strong opinions about things that maybe aren't rational, but they seem like they make a lot of sense at the time.
Oh God, yeah. No, absolutely. Okay, so I'll give you a perfect example. I was one of those people. I never liked sports. Well, I shouldn't say I never liked sports. I liked sports before I was a teenager. I liked watching basketball. I liked watching hockey. And then I kind of fell out of it because it was never really something I felt passionate about. It was something that my brother and my dad were super into. So it was just I was kind of watching it while hanging out with them. Then I kind of got out of it, and then like it got to a point where like people around me would be talking about sports, like, oh, fucking sports are dumb, you know. And it was just like I would get so annoyed. And now I'm just like, yeah, it's cool. You guys dig it, you know. Like I don't give a shit. But back then, it was like fucking sports. Sports are stupid. Comics and video games, that's where it's at.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you nailed the best example too. Like for my own life experience, you know, I used to play Little League baseball and I enjoyed it. You know, I played other sports, never really in an organized way, but you know, I like sports. I liked watching certain sports. My dad was a huge sports fan, both to play and watch. It was just like number one hobby, and I would share it with him a little bit. And I didn't have anything necessarily against, you know, hockey, for example. I had no reason to hate it, but yeah, as a person who read comics and fantasy novels and, you know, kind of self-identified as a nerd, I fell eventually on that side of like, oh, fucking sports are stupid. People who play sports are like dumb jocks, like idiots.
Fucking meatheads. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, of course, you grow out of that and realize, yeah, that's a stupid way of thinking. But at the time, it felt right.
Yeah, and I think the other opposite was true too, because you know I met Christina, who's now my wife, when I was 17, and she was a jock, right? She played basketball and soccer and ran cross country and did all kinds of stuff. Like she was always really into outdoors and physical activities, and it was kind of this opposites attract situation, and at the time I thought it was really cool. Like here I'm this nerdy bookish type, and then, you know, my hot girlfriend is like, you know, like super in shape and like, you know, can kick your ass on the soccer field or whatever,
right?
And but she kind of felt the same way, where she was kind of like, yeah, you know, hell yeah, like, you know, being a jock and being popular, like this is cool. Like I don't want to be some nerd. I don't want to watch like, you know, stupid sci-fi movies and, you know, listen to that like electronic music or whatever it is that the nerds are into now. You know, like she was on the other side of that coin, and you know, we were not the opposite attracted couple, but you know, of course, over the years we realized you have a lot more in common than you're willing to admit at the time.
Exactly.
Oh man, but like I said before, I'm sick today. I hope my voice isn't too raspy. I've been sick on and off for about 3 weeks. Everybody in my family is sick, and it's just making me irritable. And my fucking dog spilled an entire fresh hot cup of tea all over one of my graphic novels and all over the fucking floor in my iPad today. And I'm so pissed. The fucking book is ruined. And I'm just like, you know what?
Worst.
Fuck the world. We're just going to hate on some shit today.
It's time for a rental rant.
Exactly. So we're going to cast our minds back to the time, you know, and when we were young and dumb and full of opinions.
Full of piss and vinegar.
And just try to imagine, you know, what it was like at the time to have these very harsh black and white opinions about the world and how it works. Because, of course, you know, when you're a teenager, when you're in your early 20s, you fucking know everything, right? Obviously.
Yeah, I mean, that's why wouldn't you? If you lived so much, you've had so much experience. Like,
exactly. And I'm young, I'm cool, I'm hip, I know how the world works, old man. You know. Oh man.
Oh Lord, looking back, Jesus Christ! Like I deal with, I bitch about it to you all the time. I deal with this at work now, and it's like, oh my God, was I like that? Like, oh fuck. You know, I didn't want to listen to nothing. What the fuck?
Oh yeah, I'm in the same boat. I work in tech, so there's a lot of like young people, and yeah, it's, oh man, whew, I definitely feel like a dad sometimes.
Yep.
Know? But yeah, what I don't want to engage in today is our normal approach to things, which is to tell people, hey, like what you like, you know, there's two sides to every story, there's exceptions to every rule. And we tend to try, at least, to have this sense of like egalitarian fairness when we look at, you know, like I've learned to like things that I at one point in my life hated, you know, like certain bands, like I mentioned, Led Zeppelin. I've learned to really, really enjoy country music. Like really, I like it a lot at a time when I never, ever thought that would ever be true. You know, there's a lot of things that I enjoy now, or I can at least understand why other people enjoy them. And, you know, I try to just go with the flow, but not today.
Absolutely.
Fuck that today.
Exactly. Yeah, because and that's the thing. Like, I definitely would agree with you on that. Like, that's kind of where I am now. Like, I don't really give a shit as long as no one's getting hurt. I don't give a shit what you like what you like. But there are things that I don't like, and that's one of the things we gonna bitch about, which is
Yes.
to kind of get us on topic here. One of the things that I threw at you was storytelling tropes that just really fucking grind your gears.
Yeah, and that's a really great topic to start on. It's very on topic for what we do here at Razor Rentals. We tell stories, and I'm sure that people listen to us and hear us fall into cliches and tropes and things. But
Oh,
there are certain things that we avoid, or at least we try to, because they're just fucking stupid.
Well, and here's the funny thing is like the first thing I'm going to bitch about is something that can be done correctly, and we've already done that on this show, which is prequels. I am notorious. I've said this on multiple podcasts, multiple different times. I fucking hate prequels. That being said, I really liked the prequel to Hot Garbage. So I
Yeah,
enjoyed what we did with that.
and
But
while I appreciate that, fuck it, man.
well,
Prequels
but
suck.
but see here, there's a reason why I like that, and it's because we didn't try to explain everything that happened in the first story. We just were like, okay, let's talk more about this garbage monster. And that's basically what we did. That is an interesting prequel. What I hate about prequels is it's like, oh, we need to address every fucking nonsensical little detail and not focus on like an overall character or something. Perfect example. While I do enjoy the prequels to Star Wars, like I didn't at the time they came out, I have since gone back and been like, okay, I can enjoy them. Although, as we discussed on our our Laser Swords at Dawn episode, I am not a fan of Attack of the Clones. But Phantom Menace I like, Revenge of the Sith I like, so it's cool. But let me give you a perfect example of the kind of shit that pisses me off. Why did Vader build C-3PO? Why was that important? Why did we need that? We didn't need that.
You don't. It's stupid. It's dumb.
Like he could have just been around. Like 3PO could have just been a protocol droid that happened to fall into the mix the same way he did in A New Hope. Like he didn't need to be built by fucking Vader. And like, if Vader's the one that built him, wouldn't he recognize him when he sees him like hobbling along with fucking Obi-Wan? Like, why the fuck is my droid that I made hanging out with my enemy? Like, that kind of shit pisses me off. The one that I bitch about the absolute most in the prequel category is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning. When we got the 2003 remake, it's like, okay, a lot of people love it. I know I'm kind of on the outskirts of that where like I said, the last 20 minutes of the movie kill it for me. But overall, it is a solid remake. It's a solid movie. I understand why people like it. The prequel, I don't understand how anyone could like. That movie just pisses me off from top to bottom. And it's because, like, all right, we find out in the original, like, or at least in the remake, so the 2003 one, we find out, like, okay, some bad things happened in this town. Like, the town fell on hard times, people started, stealing and murdering and all that. Like, so we kind of get this idea that this fucked up family unit that isn't a family kind of came together for survival. That was the story I was kind of hoping to see. Like, what happened here? No, we find out like, oh yeah, Leatherface, he's got fetal alcohol syndrome, and old Monty lost his legs because Leatherface was playing with a chainsaw and got mad. Sheriff Hoyt got his teeth knocked out for reasons. Who cares? Like, why do I need to know how Sheriff Hoyt lost his fucking teeth? I don't need to know that. Tell me what happened to the fucking town. Like, like why? If this is a prequel, give me a backstory, not dental issues.
Right. Well, I think at the heart of it is that too many prequels, and by the way, like the one I hate the most is Solo, which I bitched about in our Laser Swords at Dawn episode, so you can go back and listen to that. But the problem with prequels is that people tend to get zeroed in on this idea that the point of a prequel is to explain everything that comes in the other movie that people already liked. It's like they want to give an origin story to everything. And the example that I gave before when I was complaining about Solo was, that little, it's like the little prologue or whatever at the beginning of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And while it's a fun little story and I like River Phoenix, it doesn't do anything to add to the overall movie. because it spends way too much time explaining how did Indiana Jones get the whip and the hat and the scar and his love of leather jackets or whatever the hell. And it's like, and then Solo, the whole fucking movie is that way. It's like, why are you stopping to explain the origin story of like all of the characters' accessories? Like, I don't care about that. If you want to tell another story that happened in this character's lifetime, I don't care if it happened before or after the other story that I already liked that character in, that one that drew me in here. You can tell a story anywhere you want in the timeline, but just tell me a story. Don't just fill in the gaps of the story that I already know. I don't care about the gaps. Like, I don't need you to fill that shit in. Like, that's what my imagination is for. Tell me a different story that's important on its own.
And see, and that's the thing you mentioned right there, that your imagination is for like filling in the gaps. That is something I think a lot of storytellers forget. Like, you don't need all the details. Why is, like, okay, A New Hope, Empire, and Jedi, why are those so cool in the universe they take place in? They don't explain anything. Like, we don't know like why, you know, Jabba the Hutt controls most of Tatooine. We just know he's an alien crime boss. That's all we need to know. We don't need to know like how he rose to power, how he got all the power. None of that is necessary. It just feels like a lived-in world because we get the players on the board, and then we fill in the blanks with our imagination. Like, that's fun. That creates this feeling of a realistic world, where it's like with like Solo, it's like, oh, he was flying solo, so they gave him the last name Solo. Remember those little dice that were hanging in the Millennium Falcon that no one fucking really pays attention to in the original trilogy? We're gonna show you how he gets those. Like, who cares? It's so fucking dumb.
Yes, exactly. Because then it's not a story by itself. And I think Rogue One is a good example of doing a prequel correctly. I mean, there's some things I don't like about it, but I think in general, it takes something like a little detail from the first Star Wars movie and is like, how did that happen? Or how did that come to be? And it builds this entirely separate narrative around it with separate characters to have their own, you know, wants and intentions and motivations and their own personal lives. And it builds this whole other side story that, yes, it connects to the story that we like. And I would say that it connects really well into A New Hope, but we didn't need that part at the end of Rogue One. I'm happy that it's there. It's awesome. I think the best part of the whole fucking movie is when, you know, Vader just nails those fools in the hallway. Like, that shit's so amazing. Cool. That hallway scene is great. I love a good hallway scene. But the movie still would have been good on its own without that fan service at the end, because they told an entirely different story.
Right.
And that's interesting, you know, and it's like you're adding to the tapestry of the world rather than just trying to fill in the gaps of the story that I liked. And that's another reason why I don't like a lot of comic book adaptations or expansions on like movie worlds, and why I never really read any of, like, for example, the Star Wars novels. But, you know, there's a lot of movie properties that expanded into novels and into comic books and even TV shows. And I tend to not like a lot of them because it's too much of this thing that we're talking about, where you read a Star Wars, you know, comic like back in the 90s, and it would be exactly that. It would be like the origin story of how Jabba the Hutt came to power, or, you know, whatever. And it's like, I don't care. I don't care how, you know, Lando came to be in charge of Cloud City. Like, it doesn't mean anything to me. If you want to tell me a story about Lando Calrissian being a badass and he just happens to end up at Cloud City, sweet. But, like, I don't want the point of the story to be, let's go back and tell all the fans, you know, how he got elected mayor. Like, I don't fucking care.
Well, see, and I think I'm glad you brought up Rogue One, because I think that's a perfect example of how you do it right, where Rogue One was a prequel in the sense of, like, okay, we knew that they Mon Mothma, when giving the plan for the Death Star, like, she explains how there was a battle and like many people lost their lives, you know, getting us this information. So instead of it being a prequel where we explain every little fucking detail about a character's life, it's explaining an event that we knew happened and just, you know, adding more to that scene. So it's like, all the characters that we got introduced to were unique, cool, interesting characters, and so much so that the TV show of Andor, that's one of the best Star Wars shows that they've done. It's fucking great. But the problem, and there's still a problem, and this is where I'm gonna bitch. It follows it even through Rogue One and even through Andor, is if we know the outcome, there's never that sense of like urgency or fear or like, oh no, what's going to happen next? We know what happens next. It's like we know nothing is going to matter that these characters do because we already know what fucking happens. Which brings me to another storytelling trope that I fucking hate, and I can only think of one movie where I will accept it, is having either the main character or someone that is very important to the main character telling the story. So when we see them telling the story at the start, anytime we put that character in peril, I don't give a fuck because I know they're gonna live. The only one I can say that I'll give a pass to is Big Trouble in Little China because oh god, what was his name? The old man. I can't. Oh fuck! Now I'm losing geek cred. I can't think of his name.
Oh, I can't think of it anyway.
But
that's okay.
But yeah, he's telling the story, and he's telling a story about Jack Burton. And we kind of get the impression from the start of the movie that, yes, Jack Burton is going to live, and so is the old man. So it's like because he's telling the story to the cops. So we get like there's no feeling of like peril for either of those characters. And every scene that we see them fighting in or navigating through traps or whatever, they're going to make it out. So it's not a big deal. I think the most egregious one is the Ghosts of Mars, where I forget the character's name, but Natasha Henstridge's character, she's like telling the story and she's the main character and they constantly put her in peril through the entire movie. I'm like, but we know she lives. Is she a ghost of Mars telling the story? No, because the Ghosts of Mars are talking about the fucking aliens. Like it made me so mad.
Yes. Yeah, I remember you brought that up. I think it was on our Escape from Earth episode that kicked off the season where, we were talking about Ghosts of Mars and you were just like, I can't help but bitch about this for a second.
I fucking hate it. It made me so mad.
And then I won't get into the example, but I brought up an example of a novel I read once where the first person main character narrator dies like a quarter of the way through the book, and then some other narrator just takes over like a fucking they handed off the baton. And I'm like, what? Like that's fucking stupid. Like, I mean, I guess that's interesting because they put him in peril and then they killed him. But it was like, what a stupid like approach to telling the story. Like, just tell it in like the third person. Like, whatever. It's dumb. It's dumb.
I don't know if you've watched any of the American Horror Story seasons. Have you watched any of that? Okay. So I was, again, notoriously, I always said I hate season 1, which is funny because almost everybody I know that likes American Horror Story loves Murder House. That's like their favorite season. I fucking hate it. I feel like it's trite, it's trash. It literally just steals from popular horror. Like, it's not like, oh, we're doing an homage. It's like, no, we are literally ripping off this scene from this movie and we're just going to do it and call it our own. And it's really annoying. But season 5, I think, is the most like, or no, is it season 5? No, maybe it's season 6. I forget. Roanoke is the season. That is a very divisive one. Now, a lot of people that watched it all the way through ended up really liking it. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of people who watched it like halfway through was disappointed with what it did. I was one of those people. Like, I stopped watching it halfway through because it was telling like all the characters that were taking place in the story. They were telling you the story via like interviews, like The Real World, mm-hmm. One of those little confessional booths type of thing. So they're telling the viewer the story, and then we'll see that exact character get put in some like harrowing situation that's like, why do I care? They literally just set the scene up so we know they fucking live. Who cares what happens? They're alive. Oh, do you think they're gonna get down out of that tree where the crazy maniac is down there? Sure they are. They're telling you how they did it. Like, it's so fucking dumb. But now and then they pivot in the middle of the season and kind of go with like, okay, we told you the setup, now we're gonna see like what happens next, and that's when like the real horror kicks off. And I'm like, oh, okay, this part's cool. But the first half was fucking terrible because it's just there was no reason to be afraid. Like everybody I talked to,
Mhm.
they were like, yeah, that would have been scary if like, something could have happened, but we knew nothing was going to happen because of the storytelling trope. Like that is such a horrible storytelling trope. Do not have your characters telling you the story, especially if it's a dangerous story. Like if it's something like a comedy or like a fucking drama where they're like, oh my God, okay, let me tell you this story of how this happened, blah, blah, blah. And then they tell you some crazy story. That works. That's fine. But if the character is going to be put in peril where I should care, having them be the one telling me the story does absolutely nothing.
Yeah. Oh God. I think the characters being in peril and then that ruining the storytelling approach is a much, there's a much bigger topic there, and beyond just like the narrator. You're totally right. It's because why would you care about a story when you already know the outcome of the conflict? Like,
Mhm.
aren't all stories just conflict? Isn't that the point of a story? Like
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't want to be magnanimous and egalitarian and be like, okay, well, I know there's exceptions to every rule. And yeah, you can tell a story where like, hey, just some shit happens or some people are talking, fine, whatever. But like at its heart, when you look at the guidelines of what a story is in the traditional sense, right? You have, act one, act two, act three, whatever. There's got to be some kind of a conflict because the characters have to do something. There has to be excitement, there has to be danger, there has to be this peril. And whether they make it out of the peril, like in one piece, is the excitement of the story. It's the tension that you want to build, regardless of
Right.
what genre it is. Like even in a comedy, your characters can like be in peril, and you're wondering, oh shit, how are they going to get out of this? Like how are Harold and Kumar going to get to White Castle? Like I don't know. Like it's a stupid premise for a stupid comedy, and they're going to get there. But like the funny antics along the way is what makes it fun. But yeah, when you've got a horror story or a story where characters are in the type of peril that is literally life or death, and you don't know if this character is going to survive, why would you telescope it by telling you the ending? Like, oh, that yeah, they're alive because they're telling the story or whatever. Oh, and
So
that makes me
dumb.
think about like I had a lot of like comic book and superhero style shit that has been just boiling in my brain lately, and it makes me think of the reason why I don't generally like stories about Superman, for example. And there's other superheroes that are
Yeah.
in the same boat, even Batman. And it's because, well, there's two reasons. There's two reasons why these types of superhero style stories don't tend to work for me. Like, you can tell me a good story in like an hour and a half movie and I'll buy it. But when we're talking about characters that people read in comic books for like years at a time. I mean, there's two reasons why the peril makes no sense and why I've never been a big fan of any of these types of characters is first of all, with a character like Superman, he's so powerful that his superpowers make him damn near invincible. So
Mhm.
peril is non-existent. There is no peril. He has a couple of weaknesses that are easily overcome. So every time I read a Superman story, it's like this painfully contortionist storytelling attempt to find some way for us to think, oh no, maybe Superman won't get out of this magic spell because he's susceptible to magic. But you know that he's going to because he's a fucking powerful superhero. Of course he's going to get out of it. He's the hero, So
And I think that's why they fall back on the trope of like we have to put your girlfriend into peril because we can't put him in peril. So haha, Lois Lane it is. Like it yeah, it's fucking annoying, dude.
yeah, exactly. It's got to be the girlfriend or the neighbor or just like, the people on the street below. Oh no. And again,
It's Aunt
there's
May.
ways. Oh, no. Oh God, Aunt May again. Then there's ways to tell those stories. But when you think about some of these like superhero characters, popular characters that have been around forever, the other reason why is because they've been around forever and because they're going to be around forever. So I will never, ever care about some villain getting the drop on Batman because Batman's not going to die no matter
Mhm.
what. The reality of the real world will not allow Batman to die. I actually read a pretty cool Batman comic today, which is unusual for me because I don't read a lot of superhero comics, but I forgot I had this, which is one of the several follow-ups to Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, and it's called The Last Crusade. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is Brian Azzarello and John Romita Jr. I'm holding it in my hand right now. And I'm like, I like both of those creators. Azzarello seems like a great writer whose style would fit Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns world really well. And it did. It was a fun story, and I'm glad I read it. And Killer Croc beats the ever-loving fuck out of Batman on 2 separate occasions in this comic. And it was awesome to see him get his ass kicked. But of course, he wins in the end because Batman can't fucking die. So while I had fun for the 10 minutes it took me to read it, I was never worried about whether Batman was going to make it or not.
Right. Oh, 100%. That kind of shit has always irritated me in comics. But specifically, like, this is the main reason that I don't like Superman, because he's too powerful. Like, there is no peril. There's never any peril for Superman. It's always the people in Superman's life. And I get it that that's kind of like the point, that it's like, you know, we're never going to be able to save everyone. Like, I kind of get that that's the story that they're telling there. But it doesn't always make for very interesting storytelling or for very interesting reading.
Yeah. I think, ironically, my favorite Superman stories are the stories where regular people are experiencing Superman as if he is some kind of a god.
Yeah.
That is interesting, because then the peril is not whether Superman is going to live or not, because of course he is. He's God. In this story, it's whether the regular people are they gonna get saved? Are they gonna get out of it? Is Superman gonna get there in time? Like, is he gonna find out they're even in danger or whatever? It's like, then you've told me a successful story, because it's the regular people who are in danger. Because, yeah, again, you know, it's literally, you're making, like, you know, Jesus the star of your book, and it's like, you know, is he going to show up before the bomb goes off? And so my favorite Superman stories are the ones where they're not about Superman, where he's like the background character.
No, I agree. I think the only 2 Superman stories I can think of where he's at the heart of the story that I really fucking like is one which is not technically the Superman we know and love, but Superman Red Son. The idea that it's like, you know, what happened if Superman fell into communist Russia instead of fucking middle America? Like, what would that world be like? That was a cool idea. It was like, okay, let's flip the script. Let's have Superman be raised in communist Russia, and how would that look as a superpower in the world? That I found very interesting. I like Elseworld stories. But the other one, and this is, I think, like the most traditional Superman story that I fucking adore, is what is it? Is it called Peace on Earth? It's the Alex Ross, the painted one.
Yeah, Alex Ross and Paul Dini wrote that.
Yes.
Yeah, Superman Peace on Earth, yeah.
That one I found incredibly cool and incredibly touching, because it was Superman basically being like, you know what, I'm going to use my powers to solve the world's problems. We're going to solve world hunger. We're going to you know, get rid of the nuclear weapons. We're going to, you know, stop war and all that. And time and time and time again, he's thwarted because mankind can't get out of their own fucking way. It's not that it's a power that he can't punch. You know, he can't fucking beat it up. It's mankind is too fucking stupid to work together. And it's like, I thought that was such a cool fucking idea. I thought that was such a great, because he fucking loses. You know, it's like Superman don't win. And it's like, that's a cool story. But no, you're right about the whole, like, you never care about, like, because he's the heavy hitters, they're never going to die. Every time they've killed one of the heavy hitters, they brought him back. And I think one of the most telling times was I think it was the Kevin Smith run of Green Arrow, when they brought back with Oliver Queen, when he first came back from the dead. And then there's an issue where he's talking to Hal Jordan, like the ghost of Hal Jordan, the spirit of Hal Jordan. And he's like, you know, when are you coming back, Hal? And he's like, I'm working on it. So you knew he was coming back. And of course, did Hal Jordan come back? Of course he came back, because they don't stay dead. They never stay dead.
They never stay dead. Yeah, well, I would say that was an interesting time in comics in the late 90s and early 2000s, because while it has been a trope in superhero comics for decades that, you know, death is a revolving door,
Yes.
there were a handful of characters at the time that were always thought of as, like, untouchable. Like, you can't bring back Spider-Man's Uncle Ben, and you can't bring back the Jason Todd Robin, the one that Joker beat to death with a crowbar. Yeah, you mentioned Gwen Stacy. Like, there's a Bucky was another one, right? Captain America's partner Bucky, which, of course, all of these characters, in some way or another have been brought back. Jason Todd and Bucky being the two biggest examples. They came back at around the same time in like critically acclaimed and fan acclaimed stories. And I would say, I think the Bucky one, personally, the Winter Soldier one, is a great exception to the rule, where I really liked what they did, because normally I was a big fan of like Dead is Dead. And the reason I mentioned this was an interesting time is that actually was an official policy at Marvel Comics in the early 2000s for years, which was Dead is Dead. Like, if you kill him, like, you cannot bring him back. And if you do, there has to be some really big important reason why, like something really amazing has to happen to bring them back. And so when Oliver Queen as Green Arrow came back, it wasn't like he was one of these untouchable characters, but he'd been dead for a while. And just like Hal Jordan, Hal Jordan as Green Lantern had been dead for so long that the legacy character who took over for him as Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner, was a really important character, and he was the Green Lantern for an entire generation of people. Yeah, exactly. Same thing with Wally West as the Flash. Like, the original Flash was Bart Allen, but he'd been dead for so long since in the 80s with the Crisis on Infinite Earths that, there's more than one generation of fans who Wally West is their Flash, Yep. But now it's like, another thing that pisses me off as a comics fan is every time there's a character that they want to kill off, there's like a fucking press release. Like, it just happened a day or two ago where it's like, oh no, some X-Man is going to die in this upcoming storyline. Everybody tune in to, the new crossover. And then, the character, whoever it is, they're going to kill him and they're going to come back in a couple of years. It's happened to everybody imaginable, especially on the X-Men. The X-Men is so bad about it that they have fucking resurrection pits now. Like, where literally they can literally bring back anybody who has ever died ever. Like, that's not an exaggeration. And they have done it to almost every mutant who has ever died. It's stupid. It's stupid. But now they're like, oh, we're going to kill somebody. And it's like, first of all, you have an in-story reason why that is stupid, because why wouldn't you just bring them back? And then secondly, IRL, that these characters are killed and brought back and killed and brought back so many times. Again, why would you care? And yet the thing that pisses me off is not their cheap attempt at a cash grab so people buy their comics. It's that all of these fans blow up the fucking internet and clog my news feeds with all of their hate and vitriol about, oh my god, I can't believe they're gonna kill Nightcrawler, oh my god. Like, who fucking cares? He'll be back in 2 years. He'll be back in 2 years. Who gives a shit?
100%. And that's the thing. It's like, unless you're reading a comic like The Walking Dead, where like dead is dead or dead is zombification, like, if a character dies, it's like, oh, it can suck, sure, but they're gonna come back. Like, I remember when we were youngins and they killed off Superman, and they're like, hey, we've replaced Superman with 4 other Supermen. It's like, all right, cool, I guess. Like, but I wasn't reading Superman at the time, so I didn't really care. But it felt like, it kind of felt like an end of an era. Like, the 90s, everything was like, it's going to be new and hip and different. Like, that was just the attitude of the time. So it made sense. Like, Superman was for your grandpa, Steel is for you, that type of thing. And then, like, with Batman, it's like, we're going to paralyze Batman and we're going to have him be replaced by this weird fucking crazy dude in like armor with a sword named Azrael. Like, and like, it worked at the time. But then you knew they were coming back, and of course they did. They came back. What was it? Just a couple years later, and they kept a lot of those characters around, and they became popular in their own right. But it was just like, it always felt like an event where it's like, oh, okay, here's the season end. Okay, let's see what next season starts. Like, you knew it was never over, and so there was never any real peril.
Yeah, it's cheap, is what it is. It's cheap.
Yeah,
and. If again, what we're bitching about is like superhero comics, and this is all of the shit that pisses me off about why I hardly ever even read them anymore, even though superheroes are the reason why I started reading comics in the first place. I liked superheroes. I liked Marvel characters. I wanted to read about these, like, adolescent power fantasies. But these days I can barely read them anymore. And like today is an exception where I read this random Batman comic that I forgot I had, and I honestly mostly read it because I was like, oh cool, let me just read this real quick. It's probably going to suck, and I'll just put it in the pile of comics that I sell, because I have a whole shelf of comics that work, because I buy and sell them online, trying to feed that addiction. So I was like, oh, I'll just read this real quick and then I'll stick it in the sell pile, and I was surprised that I liked it. But it's a rare exception that I even bother anymore for all of these reasons, because the characters are never in peril. When they are put in peril, they're going to be fine. And even when they go through with, oh shit, they killed that guy, well, whatever, he'll be back.
Right.
Nothing is ever permanent. Nothing ever matters. Nothing. That's what that thing that really bothers me, is that nothing ever matters. So every time I read one of these stories, I have fun for 10 minutes, and then I feel like, well, okay, sure. Now what? Like, was it worth the $4 that I spent? Like, was it worth the 10 minutes where, I guess I could have just flipped, TikTok videos on my phone and got the same amount of, serotonin as I did from this, $4 comic book, I suppose. And it matters about the same in the long run.
And and I hate to say it, but as fans, we're part of the problem for this, because like I'm going to point over at my biggest fan base, or fandom, I should say, is horror movies. Us horror fans are a big reason why this is a thing. Look at Halloween 3. Like, we killed Michael Myers in Halloween 2. We're like, all right, Halloween 3, brand new story idea. It takes place at Halloween. It's a great story in its own right. Like, most fans really like Halloween 3. It's a good movie. But on the whole, everyone's like, where's Michael Myers? Why Michael Myers back? Like, did you watch the last one? He died. But no, where's Michael Myers? So they brought him back. Michael Myers originally was just a dude. Like, he wasn't some supernatural force. He was just a dude. And then they had to make him a supernatural force because they had to bring him back from the fucking dead to keep the fans happy. So what ends up happening? We go into this crazy la la land of, the Cult of Thorn and all that. It could have been done well, but it wasn't. We discussed that in a previous episode. But then so they go back to, oh, he's just a dude. Forget that other stuff happened. And we keep recycling. We go, how is Michael gonna come back this time? How is he gonna come back this time? Now, I would argue that the way they did it with Jason worked, only because it's like, all right, the first movie, Jason wasn't the killer. Then it's like, okay, we get Jason as the killer. He never gets killed in 2 and 3. He gets defeated, but he doesn't fucking die. Part 4, he fucking dies. Like, we see him die. So part 5, it's an imposter. Part 6, they fucking resurrect him Frankenstein style. And it's like, all right, you know what? That I will buy that. I will take that as a horror fan and run with it. You resurrected him. He's now an unstoppable zombie. Cool. He's not just, how did the killer magically come back from life? No, we show you how we brought his ass back to life.
Yeah, they transformed the character.
Yes.
I agree. And while Friday the 13th Part 6 is like one of my favorite movies, period, not even just horror movies, but favorite movies, period, of all time, it is exactly, part of the problem, because Part 5 came out, and I fucking love Part 5. I think Part 5 is a great movie, but it gets shit on because people bitch that it isn't Jason. I would argue that if it had been Jason, then people would like that movie. There's no reason to dislike it. If you look at all the movies in the Friday the 13th franchise, the ones that tend to fall toward the bottom are like, like Part 8, for example. Like, well, Part 5 is better than Part 8. Like, so many more cool things happen in it. Like, it may not be the best one, but it certainly would be like a mid-range movie. But because it was an imposter, a lot of people are like, fuck that, we don't care, we want Jason back. But I like the fact that they at least tried to do something different. They transformed the character. It wasn't just the same old. Yeah. Whereas, on this topic of superheroes, it's like, they kill Superman, they bring him back as, 4 different guys. And you know what? That was interesting. I'll give them that. Like, they tried something different. They didn't just immediately bring back Superman, because you knew they were going to. Like, you knew they were going to. I was like, I was like, what, 13 when that happened? And even as a dumb 13-year-old, I fucking knew that Superman was coming back. All these people who were in the comic book shop where I eventually ended up working, and they were all like, oh man, like, I can't believe they're killing Superman. Like, I'm going to save this comic. It's going to be worth so much money someday because Superman's never coming back. Like, he's dead. And I'm just like, you fucking fool. Like, of course he's going to come back.
One thing I want to say real quick about before we get off the Friday the 13th Part 5, I'm going to always give it higher marks because it has Miguel Nunes singing in a porta-john. That's worth its weight in gold right there.
Absolutely. See, it's a good movie. It's a good movie. You know, I personally put it higher than some other movies in the franchise that, you know, the average, we'll say average Friday the 13th fan, you know, would like. Like I don't love part 3. I would definitely put 5 above 3, maybe even above 4, and maybe that's blasphemy, but 5 is just a fun movie, and I don't care that it's Roy, you know, the ambulance driver. Spoiler alert.
See, and it's funny because like I kind of agree and disagree because I you know I love part 3, but I love part 3 for nostalgic reasons. Like that was the like obviously I mean he gets his hockey mask, but that was the Jason that scared the piss out of me as a kid when we see him unmasked. That weird smile he has scared the shit out of me. Plus, like I love the spear gun scene. You know, I loved the whole opening. Like there's a lot of stuff that I really enjoy, but as a kid, I watched that one a lot. So part 3 was like I got that nostalgic love. Part 4, I don't have the nostalgic love for it, but there's so many moments that are like laugh out loud funny for me that it's hard to put 5 over it. But I'll put 5 on the same level. I'll definitely put it over part 8. I like part 5 way better than part 8.
Oh, heck yeah, yeah. And as somebody who enjoys part 8, I love part 8.
Same.
But I love it in the way, you know, that you love a movie because it's like so bad it's good, you know?
Yes.
Like part 8
and I mean, it's Kane
dumb.
Hodder. You gotta love Kane Hodder, but you know.
Of course, there's things in the movie that are awesome, but you know the same is true for about half of those. But anyway, we got like you know way off topic.
Yeah, we got sidetracked there.
That's okay. That's okay. I mean, we're just talking about stuff that you know that sucks, and I don't want to spend the whole episode talking about superheroes because you know there's other things that we could talk about. But the point is, it's that I get annoyed when I spend hard-earned cash and the rare amounts of free time to sit and try to enjoy something entertaining, whether it's a movie or a comic or a novel or whatever, and I end up with something that's just lazy, and it's blatantly and transparently lazy, and it makes me angry to the point where I sit down to try to enjoy myself, and instead I the opposite happens. I end up just getting agitated and like, what the fuck, you know, like now I need to find something else to like calm myself down. I was trying to relax and you got me all worked up.
Well, and it's funny, like this whole just going back to the whole death means nothing thing in comics. This can you know translate into film and video games and stuff as well. Like I'll use 2 of my favorite video game franchises as an example. This is just the story when you take the peril away from death, your storytelling options become very limited. So like Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat has been one of my favorite video game franchises since I was 11. I've fucking adored this franchise. I've played every game in the catalog, played the spin-off games, you know, played like the games on different systems just so I could see the secrets in this one versus this other one. You know, like I remember playing MK Trilogy on PS1 and then playing MK Trilogy on N64 because the character of Chameleon was slightly different on the N64. It was the female ninjas instead of the male ninjas. Who the fuck cares? But I did. I played through all that. But again, death means nothing in that universe because a lot of it is just the fun of beating the shit out of someone and then murdering them at the end. But in the overall story, you know, they went this crazy, like, time-bending, universe-breaking storytelling with Mortal Kombat as the game went on. And they had to reset. They had to reset twice. But they did it in the context of the story, which is cool. But here's where I'm going to say it sucks when death means nothing. Because every time they've killed an important character, you know they're going to come back in some way, some form, whether they're going to be resurrected as like a zombie version of themselves and then eventually get their soul back and get their humanity back. And like, oh, look, they're fine again. There's always going to be something like that. But when you do that, the only way you can create peril is to constantly up the stakes. So they went from like, all right, you know, we're resurrecting and killing characters. We're going to have Armageddon happen. It's leading up to like the world is going to end. So then you get to this world ending game with MK Armageddon. And it's like, what's the next game going to be? It's going to be a reset. It's going to be like, oh, right before Shao Kahn destroyed everything, Raiden sent a message back in time to his younger self to warn him about what could happen. So then, like, back in time, history changes because they did different decisions. So we reset, and then we get to another world-breaking event where it's like the entire universe has to be remade in Liu Kang's image, and it's like, death means nothing, and you just have to keep upping the ante to these ridiculously cosmic levels. Same thing happens in World of Warcraft. Now, it's great for a playing standpoint that if you die, your character's not just perma dead. Like, it's great that you can go like run back to your corpse and resurrect. But from a storytelling standpoint, it's a little weird. Like, you're this hero of legend that has been helping this world for decades in game, and actually in real life, if you've been playing it since it's been out for over 2 decades. But like, you've seen characters grow into, like, from children into adulthood in the story context of the game. But we got to a point where all the major players were getting killed. All the major heroes were dying. We literally go into the afterlife. We go to the Shadowlands, which is like the afterlife in that game. We defeat the big bad of that world. We restore order to the universe of death. And then we just come back to the world of living. Now in the game, like, we can just travel back and forth to the land of the dead. Like, death means nothing. We can just go and talk to, like, dudes who've been dead forever. So it's like, yeah, it was cool when they killed off, like, fucking, oh my God, why I'm losing geek cred here. Fucking, I can't think of his fucking name. There's the old leader of the Alliance. Fuck, I can't. But anyway, my point is, like, you can go and talk to these characters, and it's like, they're not dead. They're just in the world of the dead. It means nothing. So you have to keep upping the ante. Now we're going to have to shatter the world in a new way. And it gets boring. Like, when you take away the meaningfulness of death in a story, you don't have many options to make it interesting. You have to keep either upping the ante or go really fucking wacky with it. Those are really your only two options. So it's a pissy storytelling trope. I hate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like I said, there are ways around it if you're creative.
Yes.
And I think stories about characters who are immortal, I think, is tricky. That's a tricky challenge to try to tackle, because again, especially if the characters are super powerful, not just immortal, but if they're powerful in some way, because you have that Superman problem all over again, where, well, this character is just a god, so, like, so what? If you want to tell a story about that character can't be in peril. The peril always has to be somebody else, or the character, the immortal, has to always be an observer. They have to be on the outside looking in, or they can never really be the main character, because what can you possibly do with them, and you definitely have to get creative. And I will say, I've read a couple of stories about characters who are immortal where the writers have found ways to put that character into a situation that was hellish in a way that was as bad as or worse than death, and usually has to do with them being trapped or cursed in some way, where something happens to them, and then the peril goes from, oh, this person's going to die, to, well, now they have to, like, live in this horrible existence forever, and and that becomes the peril of, oh my God, it's never going to end, but how often can you use that? I mean, how often can you tell a story about that type of an immortal, godlike figure before it's just like, okay, now we've seen that fucking thing over and over again?
Exactly. And again, it's funny. We are both bitching about these types of tropes, and I'm sure astute listeners have probably noticed that we've played in those sandboxes a couple of times, and we'll definitely play in those sandboxes more in the future.
Absolutely.
But again, keep in mind, like, one of the things we do with this show is, like, we're almost poking fun at the properties themselves. And sometimes that goes, like, those types of tropes go hand in hand with this type of storytelling. So, like, it's not, again, I know we're trying not to be all, egalitarian on it. There are times that this kind of stuff can work, but I find that it has to be more in a comical nature. Like, I feel like you can't do serious drama, like a serious dramatic story with, where death is just not a thing, where death doesn't mean anything. It's hard to do that. Like for example, all right, it's big spoiler if you're a fucking Harry Potter fan out there. But if Dumbledore came back, that would have ruined so much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was such a poignant part of the story. Like, yes, it was cool that, you know, when Harry, you know, quote unquote died, when it was the Horcrux that died, and he got to speak with Dumbledore, that was cool. But at the same time, like, if they found a way to bring him back, which was one of the things at the time, if you remember us talking about it, I was convinced. I'm like, no, he's coming back. He's not dead, because I was very upset about it. But
yes,
I'm so glad that never happened, because had it happened, I feel like it would have cheapened that entire moment. And I still to this day think that's one of the most powerful moments in the films and in the book, because it's just like, holy shit, like, that actually happened. Like, but if you take away that impact, what the fuck does death mean in the story?
Yeah, and I think at least what we try to do is we try to, like, hang a hat on it, like, to the point where, yeah, we know what we're doing. Like, we know when we're, you know, telling a silly story and we're leaning into cliches and tropes. Like, I try to call it out, you know.
Oh yeah.
I want to call that out, because it's like we're just having fun over here and we're just improv shit off top of our heads. It's not like we're sitting down and really, you know, trying to map out, you know, something complex, or we haven't had some, you know, lightning in a jar idea of like, oh, I found this great twist, you know, for a story, this really, really cool, like, you know, twist to end a mystery or whatever. Like, those ideas aren't common enough for us to, you know, get on a podcast every other week and come up with some, you know, new story. So, you know, we're just here having fun. But at the same time, you know, I still feel justified in just taking a minute to bitch, and, you know, I hope that people like these types of episodes and they want to listen to the rant, and if they don't, that's fine. But, you know, we're still just enjoying ourselves, because this is like how we hang out with our friends. We've said that before. And, you know, what else did we used to do when we were teenagers and in our early 20s other than just get together with our friends to bitch about stuff, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and I know we discussed this on our Secret Origins talk at the end of last year, but you know, like, we referred to it as the Denny's days, where you and I and several of our other friends would hang out at Denny's, and we would just show up and just sit around and talk and smoke and drink too much coffee, and 9 times out of 10, all we did was bitch about pop culture. You know?
Yeah. And everybody was so opinionated. I remember, and I won't name them now because I don't want to call anybody out who also might remember or have a better memory than me. But I remember that there were prevailing opinions in that group of people where, you know, whether we hate this band or, you know, we hate this movie director, or, oh God, those types of movies suck or whatever. And to the point where, like, I was kind of nervous to, like, disagree, you know?
Yes.
It's like,
yes.
You know, part of why you become so opinionated is like you're just kind of going along with it. Yeah, that band does suck. Fuck those guys. But at the same time, you're like, I don't know. I kind of like Nickelback. I mean, I don't know.
And see, and that was the thing for me. It was always music back in those days, because, like, I mean, you've known me for a long time. I've always listened to a lot of shit. Like, I'm all over the board on, like, you know, I'm listening to rap or ska or rock, or, you know, I'm listening to freaking like Richard Cheese and Rage Against, Lounge Against the Machine. You know, I'm listening to weird shit, and, like, I like everything. But back then I was very much, like, stringent of, like, oh no, I got to keep my, like, whole goth facade up. No, I only listen to Bauhaus and 9 Inch Nails and The Cure. Like, fuck everything else. And I was, like, so afraid to be like, yeah, you know what, I really like the Jay and Silent Bob soundtrack, it was fucking awesome. You know, like, it was just like, it was so stringent with music. And I think a lot of that was because at the time I was working at Media Play in the music department, and everyone was, like, known for their thing. You know, like, Ito was, like, Canadian rock, and like, you know, Colleen was, like, that classic, like, college rock, and I was, like, the goth dude. Like, you know, so it's like I had to keep up appearances, and it's like, but I like that shit too.
Yeah, it might even be enough material for a whole other rant to talk about music, because I know I mentioned a couple of bands at the very beginning when we were keying this up, and now that we've kind of circled around to it, I think that, you know, we kind of came down a zigzag path to the one topic that I think you find people who are the most opinionated, and they don't grow out of it. They don't tend to grow out of it, because we're talking about these like early 20s, like, very, very intense opinions. But when it comes to music, people tend to hold on to those.
Oh, yeah.
People get really judgy, really, really judgy about taste in music. A lot of the music content on social media, like TikTok, for example, is people who are talking about bands, but there's always some element of like, fuck you if you don't like it, or like, I like this band anyway, or this is my guilty pleasure. And it's like they have to qualify it in some way before they talk about a band that they like, because it's like they want to introduce the concept of, hey, don't think I'm stupid, just like listen, just trust me for a second, I'm going to say something weird. And it's like, why do we do that when it comes to music?
It really is confounding, because like, I mean, just the idea of a guilty pleasure in general, like think about that concept there. You feel bad because you are enjoying something. Like, that's dumb. Like, that's kind of going against form. If you're enjoying it, why do you feel bad? Like, if no one's being hurt in this situation and you're just listening to some fucking music, why do you feel bad about it? Who's making you feel bad? Why do they count? Like, that's dumb. Enjoy it. Like, but again, I 100% agree, because I used to have to qualify loving Rob Zombie so much as a guilty pleasure, because I'm like, yeah, I know, I like, lyrics are the most important thing to me in a song, and he can't write lyrics to save his life, and every other word is yeah, but at the same time, I'm like, I still love his music and always have. But it's like, I always had to qualify it. Now I'm just like, fuck it. Yeah, I like Rob Zombie. Can he write? No, not at all. I still enjoy it.
Yeah. I feel the same way, because my two favorite bands of all time are Zayo, which is a formerly Christian kind of metalcore band, and then They Might Be Giants, who are this quirky like new wave act that have been around since the 80s. And there have been times in my life when I have been like confident and proud to mention one of those bands, and then there's been times when I've been embarrassed, or I feel like I have to qualify it in some way. Like I said, with Zayo, it's like, there's people who shit on them because, oh, they were this stupid, like, preachy Christian band. And it's like, yeah, I mean, first of all, that was a long time ago, but also, like, not really, And then, same thing with They Might Be Giants. It's like, isn't that band that does that Particle Man song? Like, all their stuff is really silly and goofy and for kids. And I'm like, it's not, first of all, but at the same time, like, I don't feel like I need to justify it. Sure, they have some like weird songs, like, so what? Like, they're an amazing band, amazingly talented, who've put out like dozens of albums and continue to innovate and be interesting and fun. And I don't want to ever have to feel bad about it. But definitely there were times in my life when I felt like I had to hide the fact that I liked, one of those types of bands, especially because they're so different from each other.
Here's the thing. Like, if somebody wants to bitch about They Might Be Giants having like silly songs, ask them if they've ever listened to the Beatles.
Right? Yes, exactly.
Because one of the most like lauded, bands in musical history, they got some weird shit.
Yeah, absolutely. Fucking like Octopus's Garden and I Am the Walrus, and like,
Exactly.
yeah, and it's funny to mention that too, because the Might Be Giants are very upfront that the Beatles are absolutely their number one influence, like by a long shot,
and you can totally see that.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think and they lean into the sort of wackiness of some of those bands, but I think people also tend to focus on like one trait of something, like you mentioned with Rob Zombie. Oh yeah, his lyrics are stupid. He goes, yeah, and it's like, yeah, so does Lil Jon, but like, he still like rocks a house party.
Exactly.
It's like, you don't need to focus on like that one like weird talent or that one weird quirk, but again, people do, especially when you're young and dumb and full of opinions.
And I feel like that's kind of what we're coming away with from here is like, when you're young, them opinions are strong. When you get old, you're like, I've seen more to life. I don't care.
Exactly. Like, whatever. Like, do what you're going to do. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. You don't like it, I don't give a fuck. And maybe that's the underlying, lesson to take away from what was supposed to be a rant where we just got some shit off our chest. God damn it. But maybe the underlying lesson here is just that, like, stop giving a shit about what other people think. Like, why do we care so much about what other people think? But goddamn, when I was a teenager, I cared about what other people thought about me more than at any other time in my life.
Oh yeah.
And even, almost as much in my 20s. And it took a really long time. I don't know what the transition period was, when I, became an adult or whatever it was that made me finally be able to embrace the concept of saying, you know what, I don't give a fuck what you think about me.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you don't like it. Oh, well.
I think for me, it started to happen kind of in my later 20s, but by the time I became a dad, I was just like, yeah, I don't give a fuck anymore. Like, think what you want, say what you want. I don't care. Like, fuck with me. I'm going to have a problem with you. But other than that, enjoy what you like. I don't care. But yeah, my late 20s, I think, is kind of when that started transitioning, because you're 100% like, when I was a teenager, I was constantly terrified what other people thought of me. Like, I was always like, oh God, like I gotta fit in. I gotta try to fit in. Like, and it's funny because that's the time in your life when you try to be all aloof about it, be like, I don't care what other people think, fuck everybody else. Like, I know who I am. Like, you put on this facade of like wanting to be independent and unique and stand out from the crowd while trying desperately to fit in with that very crowd that you're screaming from the rooftops that you want to stand out against. But it's like you want to fit in so bad, but it's like once you hit an adult, like you get tired, you just don't care. It's like, fuck it. Like I don't care what anyone else thinks. I'm just gonna sit here with my fucking beer or my pot cookie and play video games and watch trash TV until it's time for bed.
Right? That sounds awesome. But yeah, to bring it back full circle, when I was a teenager, as much as I hated jocks, I really cared a lot about what they thought about me.
Same, dude. And again, because it's like a lot of times they were the popular kids. So it's like, as much as you would decry, like, I don't want to be popular, of course you wanted to be popular. Everybody wants to be liked. Like, you don't want people to have animosity towards you. Like, nobody sets out to be like, I'm going to be a real shitheel today. Ha ha ha. Like, no, you either do that as a defense mechanism because you've been through some shit, or you put on that facade hoping that other people will be like, wow, that guy really doesn't care. I'm going to go hang out with him. Like, you're trying to fit in.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. But I think
this took some weird turns, man.
Yeah, it did. We somehow ended up back where we started, but with a different topic. Somehow the topic shifted, but that's okay. I'm fully embracing the fact that I'm not going to care what people think about this episode.
Yeah.
I mean, I do. I can't help but care. I mean, I want, and I want people to like it. I want people to download it. And I hope that people like listening to the Rental Rants. To me, they're an interesting break from the normal format. And I feel like if we just did like the same old, like, let's tell another horror story remake or whatever every single time, it would get boring for everybody, for us and for people listening. Like, right. It would become, the sort of going back to the comic book, concept for a minute. It would be the same kind of villain of the month thing where it's like, oh, here comes Spider-Man again to beat up. Who is it this time? Is it Elektra or is it the Lizard? It's like, it's the same old bullshit. And I like the rants and the super gushers because it gives us a chance to, talk about some other types of things. And sometimes we get fun ideas for other episodes out of these. But yeah, I'm also fully okay with this one. Is a filler, guys. This is the filler episode while we get ready for the next real episode.
But I also think for anyone that really enjoys this show or listens, that just want to kind of point out, this is kind of an insight into what your and my friendship has always been. Like, literally from day one, it's always been like finding common ground, like things we each like. So super gushers, like, oh yeah, no, I love that. Oh my God. Like, Garth Ennis is such a good writer. Did you read this? Blah, 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 blah. Like, we, gush about something. Or finding a mutual hatred of like, oh, you know what fucking story I hated, blah, 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 and bitch and rant about it. Or it was like, I got a really cool idea for a story. Now hear me out. And then we sit there. We used to make up stories. Like, I remember one, and I wish I could remember how we how we did it, but because, you know, it's like lost to time and memory. But we were at your apartment in Chilai. It was one of those times where it was snowing really bad. So like I was waiting for the snow to break before I was going to drive home. And so we were just literally sitting on the 2 couches that you had in your living room. Like I was on one, you were on the other. Maybe I was on the beanbag. I can't remember which, but we were kind of just chilling there. And we were talking about how the Marvel universe, you know, actually does talk about like an afterlife and God, but it also has like, you know, Thor and like Hercules and, you know,
Yep.
all these different. And we were talking about like how we could make that work. Like, how could we make sense of all this and kind of like a Crisis on Infinite Earths thing with various religions in a superhero world? I don't remember what the hell we came up with. I just remember we talked about that all fucking night until the snow broke, and I was like, "Oh, I got to go home now." But like,
oh shit, the sun's coming up.
right. But that is totally how, like, these episodes, I think, kind of perfectly encapsulate like what hanging out with us back in like the 2000s would have been like, talking about pop culture, making up stories, or like sharing, like getting mutually excited about like something we love.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And those are the 3 types of episodes that we do. And at the risk of pulling our puds even more, because we had a whole episode about that at the end of last season. It's called The Morgue File. You can go check that out.
Indeed. Fun episode.
But yeah, but exactly right. We do the improvs because we just can't help but tell stories, and we do the rants because sometimes you just got to bitch about some stuff. And then, you know, the super gushers are, we mentioned before we started doing those to balance out the fact that, you know, we were always being so negative when we were, you know, not telling stories. So, but yeah, this has been fun, Mike. I'm still sick. My back still hurts, but I'm a little bit less in the mood to be bitchy and hateful towards some stuff. But we'll see. I got some comic books here that I'm going to try to read. I got some tea and honey because my throat hurts and I want to get some rest. But I got some comic books here, and I'm hoping that these aren't going to fucking piss me off.
So meanwhile, I'll be getting ready for work where I know I'll get pissed off. But, you know, that's a story for another time.
Yeah, I do not want to go back to work tomorrow, but anyway, thanks for tuning in to the Raised by Rentals program. You can find us, as always, raisedbyrentals.com, at Raised by Rentals on the socials. I probably should do a better job of expanding beyond some of our current platforms, so this is a reminder to myself as I'm listening to this later that I need to do that for season 4. Check out radpantheon.com for a super team of podcasters, artists, musicians, all sorts of creative people supporting each other to help spread the gospel of rad stuff. If you like this show, there's definitely something else on there that you will be into. Mike, you have anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, sure. Check out The Boogeyman's Closet, also on the Rad Pantheon. Our newest episode should be out. Well, actually, by the time you hear this, we'll already have an episode out. But we're doing things a little slow this year, kind of taking our time, you know, not hitting the 4 episodes every month, but, you know, we're putting out a couple episodes every month, and there's it's kind of freeing that we're not doing the constant voting on everything where we have to try to get certain things on the docket. We're just kind of picking movies this year while we figure out our scheduling situations. So I know one of our upcoming episodes is going to be Tourist Trap, which is something I've been wanting on the show forever. Nice. One of the rare PG horror movies that scared the fuck out of me. I still can't believe it was a PG, but, you know, that's probably because PG-13 didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Concrete Behead Saturday Morning Monster Mash, where 3 grown man children bitch about pop culture and talk about Muppets.
All right, definitely check those out, and everything else in the Red Pantheon. And of course, as always, if you had fun with us, visit us on those socials, drop us a line, leave us a comment, leave a podcast rating. Tell us what you think we should have an unreasonable opinion about next time. And with that, I'm Josh.
I'm Mike.
And we have to return some videotapes.
Raised by Rentals is a member of the Rad Pantheon network. Visit radpantheon.com to support rad stuff. The theme music is Forbidden Fruit by Velvet Bethany. You can purchase music and learn more at velvetbethany.com.
Let the hate flow through you.